Well, good afternoon. This is Pat Cruzy with Big Iron Livestock. This is the Monday afternoon Livestock Market Wrap-Up. It's Monday the 14th, and I've got Daryl Holliday with Country Futures in Frankfort, Kansas. And Daryl, just another exciting week in the markets. I did go out and get some of the USDA information. Finally got a little breather in the heat and run up in this markets, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But noticed in Colorado was steady to two lower on these five weights at 385 to 95 predominantly, and there was one really fancy group just over $4. South Dakota was higher in this market by about 6 to 8, but predominantly I focused on Nebraska. They were 10 to 20 lower, with most of the cattle 10 to 12 lower in that 4 to 10, 410 to 415 range. Kansas was steady to firm, maybe up a couple, 2 to 4 on some really fancy kind in that 4 to 405, with a couple really nice groups at 408. So kind of the market's all over the place, and I threw most of it in reasoning just because of some of the comments beyond the tariffs and back and forth with China. I think we're going to continue to see a lot of volatility in this market with the uncertainty, but we've been up for so many weeks. Maybe we've got to have a couple downturns and let these traders reestablish and figure out what they want to do next. But what's your thought on the market?
Well, a couple things that might be outside the dynamics of some of the common thought is this is when you were primarily looking at calf prices, which have been, as you said, I can't even remember how long you have to go before they weren't up. So
weren't up, right? Yeah.
You were absolutely right. But one dynamic I think is fair to say is because one of the things you notice is that the feeder index did back up some last week, but it turned right back around and we're now higher again.
Yeah.
So what does that tell you? Well, part of what's going on there is that we're so close to grass now that the 5-weight animal just doesn't. That's just not what they're looking for. If you want, they want that high 6, low 7, and that gets into the index. And so they want something big enough now that when they get to, if it's a May 1 turnout, which if you talk about the Flint Hills in Kansas, that's a lot of it, or even the northern, they're close enough to turnout that they'd like to have a bigger animal. So the 5 1/4 weight steer has a different destiny now. I'm not saying it's terrible, but I think that's one factor that you have to come and play that you would normally see. No question, the back and forth on the tariffs. The cash market, fed cattle market was lower last week, but we really couldn't even trade cash cattle. We didn't trade 1,000 cash cattle in Kansas last week. Now, Cargill bought 5,000 head on a bid to grid, but they weren't cash. It was a very tight number, little trade. And I think Packers will be back in here fairly early this week. Matter of fact, on Monday they were back in bid. One of them was bid in 204. So you're right. You're absolutely right. They cause a lot of pressure in the futures, and then of course we get the change in what we're doing, and they go with the 90-day reprieve, if you will, and the market goes higher, and we start higher. The second thing I want to just mention is that, and the beef side of things, we have to remember that April is way oversold as the peak month. That is not, matter of fact, even last year, both beef and the Fed March and the cash prices were lower in April.
Right.
Good. And we mark it up early in March to get ready for the quote spring weather. But then what happens is we really don't. April's not near as good a beef movement as you see in May and June, and that's part of why we haven't seen this momentum in the beef, the wholesale beef move to levels. So I think it's people are many times, if they really look at the seasonals of the choice beef product price, they will find that as a whole, it tends to weaken from March into April after a rally into March, but then get a lot better in late April and into May. So we're going to break through that 342 area. My suggestion would be that'd be sometime in mid to late May.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, and the demand still appears to be
Yeah.
good. Even at these levels, we're still
Yep.
showcasing
Yeah.
and moving a lot of meat out of the
Yep.
retail stores, and
Yeah.
with grilling season coming,
Yep.
that
We are.
demand should continue to continue on.
Yeah, it
One of
will. I think it will.
Yeah, one of the things I wanted to make note of. So the last 2-3 weeks on the short term and even the long term outlook from the weather patterns, it's been fairly dry and continues to long term look not so friendly for the heart of the beef industry, but just got a little improvement here. The 8 to 14 day is above normal for precip in the next week and a half. So a good sign. If we don't get weather here, then this thing turns
Mhm.
back to the April, May, June is still below normal precip, but hopefully we can get some rains in here. From a replacement perspective on females, we sold cattle this last week from $4,000 to $5,000 on good young pairs, the highest we've seen. They've sold some I saw in Kansas a couple of weeks ago. And it still seems to be strong, even though it's really, really dry. But this may help us out and uh, give us a little extra bump in interest from folks that are looking to replace some cattle. But a lot of ponds still dry as I talk to guys in parts of west central Kansas, all of western Nebraska. It's awful dry, a lot of dust blowing. So we're going to need some good rains. Will this weather, my question to you is, uh, if we start, if we don't get normal rains from here on out, and the normal rain should happen in April and May showers. If we don't see that, um, what's that do for this market?
Well, it's a dynamic that I think will have a market impact. But my opinion is at this point, I'll give an example. Western Oklahoma is probably as dry as anybody, right there with Western Nebraska and far
Yeah,
Western Texas. In a lot of those areas, they've already liquidated so many cows and how we got here. I'm sure there could be more liquidation.
yeah,
Obviously, hay would be short, but we also have areas around them that have a lot of hay, which is unusual. When you go
true.
back to the droughts, recent droughts we had in 2021, 22, we didn't, it was a bigger area. Now,
And
that,
we didn't
why
have
is
the
that
hay
important?
feeds. We didn't have the
That's
feedstuffs
right. We didn't
then.
hay the hay to even ship into there. I mean, it was
Right,
bad. Okay.
right.
Now, with all that said, you really have got a two-phase question, and I think it's very good. The first one, I think we don't want to miss this. I completely agree. We are set up to see good rains really from this coming weekend through the next week at
Yeah,
least. That is really important and would make life a whole lot better for a whole lot of people, no matter where you are in this market. Okay, so I totally agree with that, and I like what it looks like. But if we miss them, you're absolutely right. There's the phase one, and then the phase two would be, well, what if this grows into a drought that goes right on into late June, July, and August? Now we've got to. Now, you can say there's a lot of hay around, but there won't be as much hay around as you thought there was because you will have your yields for the coming year won't be very good. So
right.
I think it's a phase. I think the first phase is certainly an issue, but not near as much an issue as if it progresses. So that is why you're absolutely right. This rain is so important because if that happens, you've kind of put you can kind of put the Iowas and northern Missouris and eastern Nebraska, eastern Kansas on hold for quite a while.
Yeah,
And if you could get the rain down into western Oklahoma, West Texas, you could kind of say, hey, we can survive till the next rain. You give them a couple of inches of rain, and it's amazing how far that will go in that
right.
part of the world. But boy, we miss it. And you're right, it does set up for You better keep your eye open for down the road. Even if the eastern part of the country gets that rain, the eastern half of the plains gets that moisture, and the west doesn't. That eastern half, that'd be helpful,
Yeah,
but
they can get
we really
along.
need to see the west get the rain, get some
Yeah.
rain, and that's important.
You know, that's a good point. We did in 23, 24 create abundance of hay in that
Right,
central, all that hay country in Nebraska,
right.
Kansas, South Dakota put up a lot of hay. I had
Yep,
an old timer tell me this week out in the Panhandle. I was out videoing some cows, and he said, "You know what? We do have some hay, but my grandfather told me, and I've kind of learned this: you can't feed yourself out of a drought."
that's right.
Because
That's
that
right.
that hail start to disappear and then prices
Yep,
go way up. Now you're
yep,
feeding
yep.
high priced hay. It can only go so long. So,
That's
but
right.
yeah,
That's what I think. That's right. That's why that phase two that I was talking about, you might feed your way or get your way through a phase one with it, but you
yeah,
cannot. I think you get into the summer. It may have seemed like you got a lot around right now,
yeah,
but it's amazing how the inventory goes away in a hurry.
right.
Yeah.
Very good.
And
Great. Well, Daryl, again, appreciate your time. Appreciate your input on the markets. We'll stay tuned, see what happens across the world and here in the United States. Hopefully, positive impacts for the beef industry, and we may talk a little bit about the new packing plant going to be opening
yeah.
up here in North Platte. We'll see what the conversation is there, and until next time, we'll look forward to seeing you next Monday. Thank you, Daryl.
Thanks, Pat.
All right, bye.